My name is Martha Jennings, and I'm 63 years old. For 40 years, I was a city sanitation worker in Detroit. I've hauled everything from broken couches to wedding dresses, tossed out after bad marriages. Nothing shocks me anymore, or so I thought. That morning started like any other. I had mopped the entire kitchen, wiped the counters, and folded 2 loads of laundry before breakfast. The smell of lemon cleaner still clung to my hands. My knees ached. My back hummed with that dull, familiar throb. So I sat down in my old armchair, the one with the patched fabric that still smelled faintly of my late husband's cologne. Then came the voice, sharp, metallic. "Stop sitting around and do something." It sliced through the room like glass. My daughter-in-law, Nina, stood in the doorway, one hand on her hip, the other waving a phone still recording from her TikTok livestream. "Did you hear me?" she barked. "You just sit there like some lazy, useless old woman." Her tone dripped with contempt, and her designer sneakers squeaked against my freshly mopped floor. My reflection stared back from the polished tiles, gray hair-lined face still breathing, still standing after decades of storms. Something in me shifted. Slowly, deliberately, I set my cleaning rag on the armrest. The air changed. Even the refrigerator hum seemed to stop. I rose from my chair, knees popping but steady. My heart beat calm and slow, like the thud of a garbage truck closing its hatch. I looked Nina straight in the eye. "Pack your things," I said. "You have 48 hours to leave." Her jaw dropped. The phone slipped from her hand, clattering on the tile. Behind her, my son Eric froze mid-step, a plate of eggs trembling in his hands. The 2 grandkids, Maya and Trevor, peeked from the hallway, eyes-wide tablets forgotten. The house went silent. Not a sound, not a breath. And Nina, the woman who never stopped talking, couldn't find a single word. I could feel the tremor under my skin, but my voice stayed cold and steady. Years of holding my tongue had trained it to sound like steel. "Did you hear me?" I asked quietly. 48 hours. That's generous." Nina blinked, finally stammering, You can't do that. This is our house, too." I bent down, picked up her phone, and placed it on the counter beside the grocery list I'd written for her that morning. My thumb tapped the phone's screen. The live stream was still running. Hundreds of comments scrolled across the display, laughing emojis, shocked faces, text saying, "She told you guess your followers got their show," I said. "Now turn it off." Eric set the plate down with shaking hands. "Mom, please, let's just talk." I turned to him. Talk. "You had 2 years to talk while she called me names in my own kitchen." Nina tried to laugh, a brittle, empty sound. "You're being dramatic." "No," I said, "I've picked up real trash for 4 decades. I know drama when I smell it. This is garbage and I'm done cleaning it." Her face turned red, then white. She reached for her phone, muttering something about calling a lawyer. "Go ahead," I said, folding my arms. "But before you do, wipe those muddy shoes off my clean floor." A nervous giggle bubbled up from little Maya in the hallway. "Grandma's mad," she whispered. I looked at her and smiled softly. "No, sweetheart." Grandma's finally awake. That's when I knew the line had been crossed, the same line I'd avoided for years. The air in the house felt different, charged alive like the moment before thunder cracks. My body shook, not with fear, but with something fierce and old. The part of me that had carried heavy bins through snowstorms, that had raised a child alone, that had never once called in, sick, stood tall again. I took a deep breath. "This conversation is over," I said. 48 hours. After that, I called the sheriff. No one moved. Not even the clock dared to tick. And that was the day the silence began. But before I tell you how it ended, before I tell you about the tires, the police, the forged papers, and the courtroom, you need to understand what it takes to clean a city and still be treated like trash in your own home. When you spend 40 years picking up after other people, you learn 2 things. 1, trash never lies. And 2, people will tell you who they are by what they throw away. I started working for the Detroit Sanitation Department in 1982. I was 22, 5'4", and weighed less than the bins I hauled. Every morning, my alarm went off at 4 a.m. I'd pull on my orange vest tie, my hair back, and meet my crew at the depot under the flickering streetlight that buzzed like a cranky bee. That's where I met Rosa Martinez, my partner in crime. She had a laugh that could wake the whole block and a mouth that never quit. "Girl," she'd say, swinging her steel-toed boot into the truck step if these men threw out their egos as easy as their beer cans. We'd have cleaner streets and quieter shifts. We were the only two women on the route. Every morning we competed for who could toss the heaviest load faster. Loser bought coffee. Some days I lost on purpose. Rosa's coffee was strong enough to fix heartbreak. Comedy lived in our work. We found half-eaten birthday cakes wigs that scared us at dawn, and once a taxidermied raccoon wearing sunglasses. Rosa screamed I hit it with a broom, and we both ran straight into a newsstand. The old man there still waved every time he saw us, but beneath the laughter, there was purpose. I used to tell Rosa clean streets, clean conscience. It was our unspoken creed. The city was dirty, but I never let it stay that way. And maybe that's why it hurt so much when my own house later turned into chaos. Life didn't hand me favors. My husband Calvin was a tow truck driver. He was strong, loud, and loved me the way Motown loves Sunday mornings. But one rainy night in '91, a drunk driver ran a red light. Calvin didn't come home. For a while, I didn't think I'd make it either. The bills piled up. My son Eric was only 4. But the city didn't stop needing cleaning, so neither did I. I strapped on my gloves, clocked in, and told myself, every load of trash is one step closer to a future. Action filled my days. Survival filled my nights. I'd clean offices on weekends, sew uniforms for extra cash, and help Eric with homework between washing my uniform and soaking my blisters. He used to sit at the table drawing stick figures of me, pushing a garbage cart. He'd say, "Mama, you're strong like a superhero." I'd smile and say, "Superheroes don't get paid overtime, baby." Years rolled by. Eric grew tall, smart, and kind, or so I thought. Rosa retired early, her knees giving out, but she still called me every Sunday to gossip. We'd laugh about the new generation of workers complaining about air conditioning in the trucks. We had air, she'd say, the kind that hits you in the face when the back doors swing open. When I finally retired at 62, the city gave me a little plaque. "Thank you for your service, Ms. Jennings." That's what it said. But the real reward was my house. 2 stories, white siding, small porch, bought with my union savings and overtime pay. No mortgage, no debt, just peace. I remember standing on that porch the day I got the keys. Rosa was there waving a plastic cup of sweet tea. "Girl, look at you." From garbage trucks to granite countertops, I laughed even though my countertops were fake marble. That house was more than walls. It was proof that years of sweat could build something clean, solid, and safe. My neighbors called me Ms. Martha, the woman who could fix a gutter and bake a pie without breaking a sweat. Every morning I swept my porch even when it was spotless. Old habits die hard. Then one afternoon the peace cracked. Eric showed up unannounced with Nina. They looked worn down. Clothes, wrinkled smiles tight. I hadn't seen them in months. Mom Eric began scratching his neck. "We've had some bad luck. Nina lost her job. I'm down to part-time. Our lease got terminated." I didn't need to hear the rest. I saw it all in his eyes, the shame, the fear, the pride swallowed too late. I opened my door wider. "You're home now," I said. For a while, it was almost nice. Nina cooked dinner twice a week. Eric mowed the lawn. The kids filled the hall with laughter. My once quiet house buzzed with life again. But soon things began to shift. Nina started moving furniture around, called it feng shui. Then she painted the living room beige, saying my red walls were too loud. I didn't argue. I thought peace was worth more than color. One morning, Rosa stopped by with donuts. "You're glowing, girl," she teased, glancing around. "Retired life suits you." Then she lowered her voice. "But tell me something, why is that woman hanging her bras on your porch railing?" I nearly choked on my coffee. I looked outside. She was right. Nina had turned my porch into her personal drying rack. I laughed so hard my ribs hurt. "Maybe she's airing her ambition," I said. Rosa laughed so loud a squirrel jumped off the mailbox. We shared that laughter, but under it I felt a strange pull, a whisper that said, "You've been generous before. Be careful now." Then came Mr. Coleman, my neighbor, 3 doors down. a retired attorney with suspenders and more stories than a courthouse. He often brought his dog, Biscuit, to my yard because she prefers your grass. Martha. One day, he noticed Eric and Nina moving boxes into my garage. Expanding the family are we, he joked. Just helping them out, I said, sweeping the porch. He chuckled, tipping his hat. Well, as long as you didn't add their names to your deed. Never add names unless you plan to add headaches. I laughed, shaking my head. It's just temporary, Mr. Coleman. He grinned. So are most bad decisions. We both laughed again, but his words clung to me like dust that won't sweep away. By sunset, I watched Nina carrying in more bags, new shoes, shopping boxes. Eric trailed behind, looking tired. I thought about Mr. Coleman's joke. Maybe it was just humor, or maybe it was a warning disguised as one. That night, I sat on my porch, hands wrapped around a mug of tea. The streetlights flickered. The wind hummed through the trees. My house looked peaceful again, but something in my chest stirred an unease, quiet but persistent. I didn't know it yet, but those small moments, Rosa's laugh, Coleman's warning, Nina's restless decorating, were the first crumbs on a trail that would lead me straight into war. Mini climax. Mr. Coleman's line echoes in my head, never add a name to your deed unless you plan to add headaches. The audience laughs, but the laughter fades into the sound of crickets, foreshadowing the storm to come. For a while, everything looked perfect. Dinner at 6, laughter bouncing off the kitchen walls, Eric fixing the leaky faucets I'd ignored for months. Nina even surprised me one evening with a casserole. She called it fusion cuisine. I called it mac and cheese that joined a gang. The kids filled the house with energy. Maya's laughter came from the backyard while Trevor turned the hallway into a racetrack with his toy cars. For the first time in years, I felt like my house was alive again. But peace, I've learned, is like soap bubbles. Pretty for a second, then gone. It started small. Nina began rearranging furniture. She moved my sofa, replaced my lace curtains with something she called minimalist beige. One afternoon, I walked into the living room and found my wedding photo sitting face down on the shelf. "Why did you move?" that I asked. She didn't look up from her phone. "It doesn't match the new aesthetic, Martha. We're going for clean lines, not nostalgia." "Clean lines," I repeated. "You know I've been cleaning lines off sidewalks for 40 years. Didn't know it was a decorating style." She blinked at me like I was speaking a foreign language. Later that night, she posted a TikTok showing how to modernize an outdated home. The caption read, "Helping my boomer mill declutter her haunted decor." I didn't even know what a meal was until Rosa called laughing. "Girl, you famous on the internet. You and that ghost lamp she made fun of." I sighed. "It's not haunted, Rosa. Calvin bought that lamp on our 5th anniversary. Well, Rosa said maybe it'll haunt her instead. You living with a tenant from hell who don't pay rent?" I burst out laughing, half from exhaustion, half from the truth. Rosa's voice always had that way of slicing through pain and leaving humor in its place. But after we hung up, I sat quietly at my kitchen table, staring at that empty spot where my lamp used to sit. My laughter faded before the kettle even whistled. Every day after that, I felt my house shrinking. Not in size, but in spirit. Nina had a way of taking up air-loud phone calls, perfume that clung to the walls, music thumping through the floorboards. Eric tried to keep peace, but his voice was soft where hers was sharp. "Mom," he said one morning, "Nina just wants to make the space comfortable for everyone." "Comfortable for everyone," I asked. "Then why do I feel like a guest in my own house?" He rubbed the back of his neck. "Just give her time." Time. That word again. I'd spent my life giving time to others, the city, my job, my son. And now my time was being measured in how quietly I could exist. Then came the curtains. My floral ones, hand-stitched by Rosa years ago, disappeared overnight. In their place hung sheer white panels that looked like ghost sheets. "It brightens the room," Nina said, "and the smell of bleach." That's aesthetic. I wanted to scream, but instead I smiled. The same smile I used when people threw away perfectly good furniture. Some things weren't worth rescuing. The small things piled up. She started labeling the pantry shelves: Nina's, Snacks Kids, Lunch, Eric's Protein. No label for me. I guess old women don't need food. One Saturday, I found her recording another TikTok in the kitchen. "This is how to make a vintage space look modern without spending a fortune," she chirped to the camera. I stood there behind her, holding a mop invisible. "Hi, everyone," I said loudly. "I'm the vintage space." She jumped flustered, then muttered, "Delete take 3. I walked out before I said something I couldn't take back. But Rosa wasn't having it. She came over Sunday afternoon bringing tamales and her full Latina fury. "Martha," she said, "you gotta stand your ground. This girl out here moving your walls like she paying property tax." "Rosa, calm down," I said, laughing. "It's fine, she's just expressing herself." Expressing herself. Girl, she expressin' eviction papers if she don't stop. We laughed until tears came, but mine were the quiet kind, the kind that sting when no one's watching. That evening, I found Nina sitting at the dining table with her laptop open and a smug little smile. "We need to talk about privacy," she said. "Privacy?" I asked, still holding the dish towel. "Yes," she continued, tapping her screen. "The kids need their own space. Eric and I need space too. It's hard for a couple to connect when someone's always around." I stared at her. "You mean me?" She smiled sweetly. "You said it, not me. Look, the garage has windows. We can fix it up nice. Add a heater. You'd have your own area, quiet, independent." My mouth went dry. For a second, I thought she was joking. Then I saw Eric in the doorway, not meeting my eyes. "She's just suggesting," he murmured. "It could be temporary." Temporary. That word again. I looked around my kitchen, my counters, my cabinets, my refrigerator covered with decades of photos and magnets. My whole life was in that room, and this woman wanted to move me to the garage like a forgotten tool. "All right," I said finally. My voice came out steadier than I felt. "If that keeps the peace, I'll move." Nina blinked, surprised. "Really?" "Yes. I've lived through worse conditions than a garage." The next morning, I dragged a cot, a lamp, and a small heater into the garage. I swept the floor until it smelled like bleach and defeat. When I plugged in the heater, it sparked once before settling into a dull hum. Rosa called that evening. "So how's the castle?" she asked, half joking. "Cozy," I said. "Got a view of the trash cans. Feels like home." She laughed, but I didn't join in this time. Out there, surrounded by boxes labeled Christmas stuff and old tools, I realized something chilling. Every act of silence, every time I smiled instead of speaking, every joke I let slide, it had brought me here. In the dim light of that garage, my heart felt heavier than any bin I'd ever lifted. Chapter 3. The house becomes smaller, 12-18 minutes rising. Tension, X-comedy, X-action thrill, 1,000 words. For a while, everything looked perfect. Dinner at 6, laughter bouncing off the kitchen walls, Eric fixing the leaky faucets I'd ignored for months. Nina even surprised me one evening with a casserole. She called it fusion cuisine. I called it mac and cheese that joined a gang. The kids filled the house with energy. Maya's laughter came from the backyard while Trevor turned the hallway into a racetrack with his toy cars. For the first time in years, I felt like my house was alive again. But peace, I've learned, is like soap bubbles. Pretty for a second, then gone. It started small. Nina began rearranging furniture. She moved my sofa, replaced my lace curtains with something she called minimalist beige. One afternoon, I walked into the living room and found my wedding photo sitting face down on the shelf. "Why did you move?" that I asked. She didn't look up from her phone. "It doesn't match the new aesthetic, Martha. We're going for clean lines, not nostalgia." "Clean lines," I repeated. "You know I've been cleaning lines off sidewalks for 40 years. Didn't know it was a decorating style." She blinked at me like I was speaking a foreign language. Later that night, she posted a TikTok showing how to modernize an outdated home. The caption read, "Helping my boomer MEL declutter her haunted decor." I didn't even know what a Mael was until Rosa called laughing. "Girl, you famous on the internet. You and that ghost lamp she made fun of." I sighed. It's not haunted Rosa. Calvin bought that lamp on our 5th anniversary. Well, Rosa said maybe it'll haunt her instead. You living with a tenant from hell who don't pay rent?" I burst out laughing, half from exhaustion, half from the truth. Rosa's voice always had that way of slicing through pain and leaving humor in its place. But after we hung up, I sat quietly at my kitchen table, staring at that empty spot where my lamp used to sit. My laughter faded before the kettle even whistled. Every day after that, I felt my house shrinking, not in size, but in spirit. Nina had a way of taking up air-loud phone calls, perfume that clung to the walls, music thumping through the floorboards. Eric tried to keep peace, but his voice was soft where hers was sharp. "Mom," he said one morning, "Nina just wants to make the space comfortable for everyone. Comfortable for everyone," I asked. "Then why do I feel like a guest in my own house?" He rubbed the back of his neck. "Just give her time." Time. That word again. I'd spent my life giving time to others, the city, my job, my son. And now my time was being measured in how quietly I could exist. Then came the curtains. My floral ones, hand-stitched by Rosa years ago, disappeared overnight. In their place hung sheer white panels that looked like ghost sheets. "It brightens the room," Nina said. "And the smell of bleach. That's aesthetic." I wanted to scream, but instead I smiled. The same smile I used when people threw away perfectly good furniture. Some things weren't worth rescuing. The small things piled up. She started labeling the pantry shelves: Nina's snacks, kids' lunch, Eric's protein. No label for me. I guess old women don't need food. One Saturday, I found her recording another TikTok in the kitchen. "This is how to make a vintage space look modern without spending a fortune," she chirped to the camera. I stood there behind her, holding a mop invisible. "Hi, everyone," I said loudly. "I'm the vintage space." She jumped, flustered, then muttered, "Delete take 3. I walked out before I said something I couldn't take back. But Rosa wasn't having it. She came over Sunday afternoon bringing tamales in her full Latina fury. "Martha," she said, "you gotta stand your ground. This girl out here moving your walls like she paying property tax." "Rosa, calm down," I said, laughing. "It's fine. She's just expressing herself." Expressing herself. Girl, she expressin' eviction papers if she don't stop. We laughed until tears came, but mine were the quiet kind, the kind that sting when no one's watching. That evening, I found Nina sitting at the dining table with her laptop open and a smug little smile. "We need to talk about privacy," she said. "Privacy?" I asked, still holding the dish towel. "Yes," she continued, tapping her screen. "The kids need their own space. Eric and I need space too. It's hard for a couple to connect when someone's always around." I stared at her. "You mean me?" She smiled sweetly. "You said it, not me. Look, the garage has windows. We can fix it up nice. Add a heater. You'd have your own area, quiet, independent." My mouth went dry. For a second, I thought she was joking. Then I saw Eric in the doorway, not meeting my eyes. "She's just suggesting," he murmured. "It could be temporary." Temporary. That word again. I looked around my kitchen, my counters, my cabinets, my refrigerator covered with decades of photos and magnets. My whole life was in that room, and this woman wanted to move me to the garage like a forgotten tool. "All right," I said finally. My voice came out steadier than I felt. "If that keeps the peace, I'll move." Nina blinked, surprised. "Really, yes. I've lived through worse conditions than a garage." The next morning, I dragged a cot, a lamp, and a small heater into the garage. I swept the floor until it smelled like bleach and defeat. When I plugged in the heater, it sparked once before settling into a dull hum. Rosa called that evening. "So how's the castle?" she asked, half joking. "Cozy," I said. "Got a view of the trash cans. Feels like home." She laughed, but I didn't join in this time. Out there, surrounded by boxes labeled Christmas stuff and old tools, I realized something chilling. Every act of silence, every time I smiled instead of speaking, every joke I let slide, it had brought me here. In the dim light of that garage, my heart felt heavier than any bin I'd ever lifted. The first few weeks in the garage were eerily quiet. The hum of the space heater became my lullaby, and the smell of oil and dust clung to my blankets. In the mornings, I'd open the side door to watch the sunrise smear gold across the cracked driveway. The pigeons always landed, first strutting like they owned the place. Funny how life turns in circles. I used to sweep city sidewalks at dawn. Now I swept my own. Old habits die harder than bad marriages. I started my mornings with the same rhythm I'd had for decades, broom bucket breath. I swept the path leading to the mailbox, even though no one else cared if it was clean. There was something sacred about motion, about the scrape of the bristles, the small proof that I still existed. One morning, Mrs. Turner from across the street waved. "Still keeping the neighborhood clean, huh, Martha?" I smiled. "Somebody's got to do it. The city gave up years ago." "God bless you," she said. "You make this block shine." If only she knew that inside the shining house behind me, I was a ghost renting air. After sweeping, I'd sit on the porch steps with a cup of instant coffee watching kids play where I once taught Eric to ride his bike. The chalk marks from our hopscotch games were long gone, but I could still see the outline in my mind, squares of pink and blue and my boy yelling, "Mama, look," before falling flat on his knees. I'd kiss his scraped skin and say, "Pain means you're growing." Now I wondered if that rule applied to hearts. Despite everything, I found small joy in repetition. Folding laundry, polishing the old brass doorknobs, feeding the stray cat that had adopted me. She was gray, scruffy, and proud. I named her Lady Dignity. Every afternoon she'd curl on my lap and I'd whisper, "You and me, sweetheart, survivors of other people's messes." For a while, that quiet became my peace, until the day the silence betrayed me. It was a Wednesday just after lunch. I was wiping down the counter when I heard Nina's voice through the cracked door leading to the kitchen. Her tone was sharp, that fake sweetness people use when lying. "Yes, that's what I said," she hissed into her phone. "Once we get her into assisted living, the house is ours. Eric's name's already on the paperwork." The world seemed to tilt. My hand froze mid-wipe. The coffee cup in my grip trembled, rattling against the saucer like a heartbeat gone wild. She laughed softly. "No, she doesn't suspect a thing. She thinks we're helping." Sweet old Martha. My stomach turned. I pressed a hand to the door frame to steady myself. My knees felt like wet cardboard. Assisted living. Those two words echoed through my skull like church bells at a funeral. I wasn't dying. I wasn't senile. I wasn't some forgotten relic ready to be boxed up and cataloged. I was Martha Jennings. I'd cleaned streets, raised a son, and built a home, brick by brick. And now my own family was plotting to erase me politely, legally, efficiently. Nina's laughter cut through my thoughts again. "Yeah, once she's out, we can redo the kitchen. Maybe flip the place in spring. Easy profit." A spoon slipped from my trembling hand and clattered onto the counter. I held my breath, terrified she'd heard me, but she was too busy planning her renovation of my life. That moment, that spoon hitting metal was the sound of something breaking inside me. I walked back into the garage like a ghost. My coffee had gone cold, the foam trembling on top. I set it down and the cup rattled against the table again, that same nervous rhythm as if it knew my anger better than I did. My phone buzzed. A message from Rosa. "Rosa. How's the garage life, Chica? You rebel," yet I stared at the screen, unsure what to say. Then I typed back, "She's planning to put me in assisted living." 3 dots blinked. Then came her reply. "Rosa. What put her in a dumpster, not a nursing home?" I laughed loud, sudden, almost hysterical. The cat jumped from my lap, offended. Tears burned my eyes, but it felt good to laugh again. Rosa always knew how to lace fury with humor. I texted back, "You'd make a terrible lawyer, but a great hit woman." She replied, "Who says I can't be both?" The laughter died down, and silence filled the space again. This time, it wasn't peace. It was a gathering storm. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound, the creak of pipes, the ticking of the heater, became a whisper of betrayal. I kept hearing Nina's voice. "Once we get her into assisted living, the house is ours." I got up and opened an old trunk at the corner of the garage. Inside were pieces of my past pay stubs from the sanitation department, Calvin's driver's cap, my union certificate, and the deed to this house folded neatly in a plastic sleeve. My name sat alone on that paper, Martha L. Jennings. No Eric, no Nina, no one else. I ran my fingers over the embossed seal, the raised edges cool under my fingertips. I thought of Mr. Coleman's warning echoing from weeks before, never add a name to your deed unless you plan to add headaches. Maybe the man was a prophet. I heard footsteps in the kitchen above faint rhythmic, probably Nina pacing, planning her next move. My eyes shifted toward the small window. Outside, the yard was bathed in moonlight, quiet, calm, deceptive. Inside me, something ancient woke up the same fire that kept me going after Calvin's death, after every long night of work when no one thanked me. For years, I'd mistaken silence for strength. I thought patience was dignity. But now I saw it for what it was: surrender. I walked to the mirror hanging by the tool shelf. The reflection staring back wasn't the woman they thought they could bury. It was the same one who'd lifted trash bins heavier than Nina's ego and outlasted 30 Detroit winters. All right, I whispered to myself. Game on. The next morning, I put on my old work boots, the steel-toed pair that had carried me through decades of dirt and asphalt. Each step on the garage floor sounded like punctuation, strong, deliberate, final. I brewed a fresh pot of coffee, hands steady now. The smell filled the air, sharp and comforting. I took a sip, savoring the warmth spreading through me. The pigeons landed again on the driveway, pecking at crumbs. Let them think I'm old, I said quietly. Let them think I'm weak. Then I smiled, slow and certain. They'll soon learn that garbage doesn't just disappear. Sometimes it takes itself out. The next morning started like any other cold breath, weak sunlight, and the smell of damp asphalt. But something felt off before I even opened the garage door. Lady Dignity, my cat, hissed at the crack beneath it. I bent down, peered outside, and my stomach dropped. All 4 tires on my old Ford pickup were slashed, not punctured, ripped. Deep, deliberate, cruel. For a second, I just stood there. Then I laughed, that low, bitter kind of laugh that doesn't sound human anymore. They really picked the wrong garbage woman to mess with, I muttered. I grabbed my phone and called the police. Detroit Police Department, the dispatcher said. This is Martha Jennings. Someone vandalized my truck, I replied, voice calm but tight. 4 slashed tires parked at 113 Westbrook. Officer Daniels, a tall, square-jawed man with a permanent coffee stain on his jacket, arrived 15 minutes later. He'd known me for years back when he was still a rookie who'd wave at my sanitation truck. Morning, Ms. Jennings. Rough start, huh? He said, squatting to inspect the tires. You could say that, I said. Guess someone doesn't like my brand of recycling. He chuckled. Any suspects? Before I could answer, movement caught my eye. Nina standing at the upstairs window holding her coffee mug like it was a trophy. The smirk on her face could curdle milk. I leaned closer to Daniels. Yeah, 1 suspect. She's got perfect nails and bad timing. He looked up, following my gaze. You want to press charges? Not yet, I said slowly. Trash day's coming. Let's see what gets taken out first. After he left, I went back inside the garage, slipped on my old orange work gloves, and whispered to myself, if I can haul Detroit's garbage for 40 years, I can haul my own problems. Those gloves had patches sewn into the palms, the smell of metal and sweat soaked deep in the fabric. They were armor, and I needed armor now. I pulled out my old flip phone and called Mr. Coleman, my retired attorney neighbor. He picked up after 2 rings. Martha, my favorite sanitation queen. What trouble have you stirred up now? Not stirred, I said. Scrubbed. Someone's trying to clean me out of my own house. He sighed. That daughter-in-law again. The one and only. Come by my place. I'll draft something that'll make her reconsider breathing near your property line. When I arrived, his house smelled like pipe smoke and lemon polish. He sat behind his mahogany desk, typing slowly with 2 fingers. We'll call this an eviction notice just in case. It's perfectly legal if the property's in your name alone, which it is, thank God. Eviction notice, I repeated, half smiling. You make that sound like poetry. He grinned. In my line of work, it is. By the time I left, I had a neatly folded paper tucked in my bag and a fire growing in my chest. Outside, Rosa was waiting in her old sanitation vest, waving a donut in one hand. Heard about your tires, girl. We don't let trash win. I raised an eyebrow. We behind her stood 6 retired city sanitation workers, all in faded orange uniforms. Their backs were a little bent, their hands calloused, but their spirits were fierce. Rosa adjusted her cap. "You think you're fighting alone, nah? We got your back. Consider this a neighborhood cleanup emotional edition." I couldn't help laughing. "You're crazy." "Of course," she said proudly. "Crazy keeps us alive." Within an hour, my driveway looked like a scene from a comedy sketch, 7 old sanitation workers standing in formation, brooms and trash grabbers like battle spears. Passing cars honked, kids waved, and someone shouted, "Go City Ladies." Even Officer Daniels drove by again, rolling down his window. "You starting a union protest, Miss Jennings." "Call it a community reminder," I said. "Some things still belong to those who earned them." Inside the house, I could see Nina peeking from the blinds. Her smile had vanished. Good. Let her feel what real pressure looks like. Rosa nudged me. "You got that paper?" I patted my pocket. "Oh, I've got it." We walked up the steps together. My heart thudded steady, not from fear, but purpose. I knocked on the front door. Nina opened it, trying to look unbothered, but her mascara trembled like her nerves. "Morning," I said cheerfully. "Lovely day, isn't it?" She folded her arms. "What do you want?" I smiled, the kind that comes from deep calm, the kind people mistake for weakness. "Just a little paperwork, nothing personal." I handed her the document. She looked down at the bold letters, "Notice to vacate," and her face drained of color. "What is this?" she stammered. "Legal housekeeping," I said lightly. "Since you enjoy redecorating, I figured you'd appreciate some official paperwork to match." Behind me, Rosa coughed to hide her laugh. The retirees pretended to sweep, forming a perfect semicircle of orange solidarity. Nina's mouth opened, then shut again. "Eric won't allow this." "Oh, he'll allow it," I said, stepping closer. "Because he knows the deed has one name, mine, and if he forgets, Officer Daniels will remind him." She glared, clutching the paper like it was radioactive. "You can't just—" "I can," I interrupted softly. "And I just did." The silence that followed felt heavy and satisfying. Somewhere behind me, a car horn honked the same rhythm sanitation crews use to signal a job well done. Nina's eyes darted past me to the crowd outside Rosa and her army of retirees, waving, grinning like victorious warriors of trash. One even lifted a garbage lid like a shield. "This is insane," Nina muttered. "No," I said. "This is justice. Trash day justice." I turned to leave the heels of my boots clicking against the porch. Behind me, I heard the crinkle of paper as she crushed the notice in her hand, the sound of power slipping away. When I reached the driveway, Rosa threw her arm around me. "Girl, that was Oscar-worthy. You didn't just take out the trash, you recycled your dignity." I laughed so hard I nearly spilled my coffee. Maybe we should patent that slogan. We all stood there for a while, the morning sun glinting off our orange vests. Neighbors peeked out of their windows, confused but entertained. A few even clapped. For the first time in months, I felt taller, lighter. Like every scar from every insult had been scrubbed clean by the laughter of people who remembered who I really was. Sometimes karma doesn't come knocking. It rumbles in like a 12-ton garbage truck. It happened 3 nights after I handed Nina that eviction notice. I was half asleep in the garage when Lady Dignity's growl woke me. Her fur bristled like static. Then I heard it, the soft thud of boxes, the squeak of tires rolling over gravel. I peeked through the small window and froze. Eric and Nina were outside in the dark, loading my things into the back of their van, my china, my photo albums, my grandmother's quilt folded like a rag. They moved quickly, whispering, glancing toward the house every few seconds. The porch light was off, but the moon lit the driveway just enough to catch their shadows, 2 thieves in pajamas, robbing the very woman who raised one of them. For a second, anger boiled up so fast I nearly kicked open the door. But then I smiled, a slow, dangerous kind of smile. "All right," I whispered to the cat. "You want dark comedy? Let's give them a show." I slipped on my jacket and called Rosa. She picked up after 1 ring. "Girl, you know what time it is." "Trash o'clock," I said. "Bring the truck." She didn't even ask questions. Be there in 10. While I waited, I filmed everything with my phone, the clinking of porcelain, the shuffle of stolen boxes. At one point, Nina tripped over my garden hose and hissed, "Idiot, hurry up before that old bat wakes up." I whispered, "Oh, honey, the old bat's wide awake." Headlights flashed down the street. A roar filled the night air. Rosa arrived driving a retired Detroit Sanitation Department garbage truck, orange paint peeling, but the hydraulics still loud as thunder. She parked it perfectly behind their van, blocking it in. The brake hissed like a dragon waking up. Eric froze. Nina turned her face pale in the headlights. "What the?" I stepped out of the garage, arms crossed, gloves still on. "Evening, family," I said sweetly. "Moving somewhere." Mom Eric stammered, "We were just recycling," I interrupted. "That's not how recycling works, son." Nina straightened her back, trying to recover her composure. "We're just taking a few things we paid for." "Really?" I said, stepping closer. "Because that china set belonged to my mother, and unless your credit card dates back to 1953, I doubt you paid for it." Rosa leaned out of the truck window, grinning like a villain from a cartoon. "Need a pickup order, Martha. I got room in the back." "Not yet," I said. "Let's see what kind of garbage we're dealing with first." The noise drew attention. Porch lights flicked on down the block. Mr. Coleman appeared in his bathrobe, phone in hand. "Is this tonight's entertainment?" he called. "Better," I said. "It's a family recycling project." He laughed so hard his pipe nearly fell out of his mouth. Then he started recording. "Evidence," he said cheerfully, "for when they claim emotional distress." Eric rubbed his temples. "Mom, this isn't what it looks like." "Oh, I know exactly what it looks like," I said. "A man trying to sneak his mother's life into a moving van while pretending she's the burden." Rosa honked the truck horn loud and long. "Need help loading, sweetheart," she yelled at Nina. "We got industrial bins for moral trash." The neighbors started gathering at the fences. Even Officer Daniels pulled up lights flashing blue and red across the lawn. He stepped out, chewing on his coffee stirrer. "Evening, folks. Didn't expect to see this much sanitation activity after hours." "Perfect timing," I said. "They were just about to take out the wrong kind of garbage." He looked at the van, then at me. "Care to explain, Ms. Jennings?" I pointed at the boxes. "All mine. They're trying to move out with my belongings." Eric's face went red. "This is ridiculous." Daniels crouched, opened one of the boxes, and lifted my wedding photo. "You sure this is yours, ma'am?" "Last I checked," I said. "Unless Nina's been secretly married to Calvin for 40 years. A chuckle rippled through the small crowd. Nina crossed her arms, furious. "This is harassment." Daniels raised an eyebrow. "You're standing in her driveway, loading her property into your vehicle. You sure you want to go with that defense?" Behind him, Rosa leaned on the truck horn again, just a short, victorious honk this time. Mr. Coleman cackled. "Oh, this is going viral," he said, still filming. Nina tried one last jab. "You can't keep everything, Martha. You're old. You don't even use half this stuff." I tilted my head, looking her dead in the eye. "Ma'am," I said evenly, "that china set ain't recyclable." The line landed like a slap. Laughter erupted from Rosa, from Daniels, from the neighbors behind their fences. Even Eric covered his face, groaning. Daniels cleared his throat, all business again. "All right, folks, unload everything that isn't yours. Right now." Rosa jumped off the truck to supervise, arms crossed. "Come on, move it. The sanitation crew's watching." Nina fumed as she dragged each box out of the van. Eric worked silently beside her, jaw tight, shame burning through his skin. The neighbors clapped every time a new box hit the ground. When they were done, Daniels nodded to me. "Everything accounted for Ms. Jennings." "Everything that matters," I said. Rosa high-fived me. "You handled that like a boss." I smiled. "Just doing what I've always done, taking out the trash." Daniels chuckled. "Guess I'll file this under domestic sanitation disturbance." "Make sure to spell my name right," I said. He grinned. "Wouldn't dare misspell a legend." The police car left the garbage truck, idled like a beast, satisfied after a hunt. Mr. Coleman closed his phone and said, "You know, Martha, if the city had half your efficiency, we'd have world peace by now." I winked. "World peace is overrated. I'll settle for a clean driveway." Rosa revved the truck engine. "Want me to haul that van too?" I shook my head. No need. They'll be gone soon enough. As the crowd dispersed, I stood under the streetlight watching Nina and Eric retreat into the house. No words, no pride left. For once, silence was my ally. I looked up at the night sky, the moon shining like a badge of quiet justice. My old gloves were still on the palms, dark with age and effort. You did good, girl, Rosa called, leaning out the truck window. Yeah, I said softly. For once, I didn't just clean, I reclaimed. 3 days after the trash truck showdown, I thought the storm had passed. The house was quiet again. My heart was too. I spent my mornings drinking coffee on the porch, watching the sunrise slide over the cracked pavement, telling myself peace had finally returned. Then the mail came. A plain white envelope sat in my box. No stamp, no return address. Just my name in handwriting that looked forced. I almost tossed it with the junk mail. But something about it felt wrong, too. Careful, too deliberate. I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. My name was printed at the top, but beneath it, someone had typed, "Transfer of property, new owner, Eric Jennings." I blinked, thinking maybe I was reading it wrong. Then I saw the forged signature. My name, but sloppy. The notary seal smudged, half missing. The air went out of my lungs. They didn't, I whispered. But they had. I stumbled back into the kitchen, sat at the table, and stared at that fake deed like it was a live grenade. After all the years, all the nights cleaning streets while my son slept safe at home, he was letting someone try to steal the roof I built. Rage and heartbreak mixed like gasoline and fire. I grabbed my phone and called Mr. Coleman. He picked up voice sharp. "What's wrong, Martha? I just got a letter," I said. And it says, "My house isn't mine anymore." "Stay put," he said. "I'll be there in 10. When he arrived, I was still sitting at the table, the forged document spread out like evidence at a crime scene. He didn't even need a magnifying glass to see it was fake. "Sloppy work," he said. "The notary stamp's crooked, and this seal belongs to a woman who retired 5 years ago. Whoever did this doesn't know what they're doing, but they're desperate." I felt my hands trembling. "They're trying to scare me." He nodded. "Or push you into a mistake. But not on my watch." He pulled out his flip phone, the kind that looked like it belonged in a museum, and started dialing. "I'm calling a friend at City Hall. Used to work the records department. She owes me." He winked. Everyone owes a lawyer eventually. While he talked, I stood at the window and watched the smoke from my coffee curl up like fog. Every breath burned. I wasn't just angry anymore, I was focused. "All right," he said after hanging up. "She'll check the official deed by morning. But Martha, we're not waiting. We need paper on our side. The law is slow, but it's steady, and when it hits hard." He opened his briefcase, tossed me a pen. "We're filing an official complaint of property forgery. You'll sign every page and we'll make copies till the machines overheat." I smiled grimly. "You know I used to fix broken compactors at work. A photocopier doesn't scare me." He grinned. "That's my girl." We headed to his office, a cramped room above a laundromat that smelled like lemon detergent and burnt coffee. Inside, I saw him switch from charming old man to full legal pit bull. He typed fast, muttering statutes and case codes under his breath. Forgery, with intent to defraud a senior homeowner. Potential felony charge. Restitution clause. "Sounds like music," I said. "More like jazz," he replied. Messy but righteous. He handed me a thick stack of forms. Sign here, and initial there. The law loves repetition. As I signed, my hand stopped shaking. Every stroke of the pen felt like taking back another piece of myself. "You're taking out the trash at a whole new level," Rosa said behind me. I turned. She stood at the door with 2 coffees smiling wide. "How did you even find us?" I asked. "Girl, half the city's talking about your little garbage truck opera. You're trending on Facebook under Ninter Trash Day Justice." Mr. Coleman chuckled. "She's a folk hero now." "More like a cleaning legend," Rosa said. "And now we're about to sweep City Hall, too." We spent the next few hours buried in paper. The printer hummed like an old friend, spitting out copy after copy. I collated, stapled, double-checked every line. My fingers were black with toner dust, my shoulders aching, but I hadn't felt that alive in years. At one point, the copy machine jammed. I banged the side, muttering, "Come on, honey, we've got work to do." It sputtered, beeped twice, and resumed printing. Rosa clapped. Even the machines know who's boss. By noon, the office looked like a paper tornado had passed through. Mr. Coleman handed me the final set of forms. "You're officially filing for property protection and fraud investigation. Once we drop this off, the courts will open a case. They'll have to respond." I exhaled a long, deep breath that felt like exercising fear. So this is it. The first punchback. He smiled. The first official one. We drove to City Hall in Rosa's old sedan. The building loomed ahead, gray and solemn, with those marble steps that made everyone feel smaller. But not me. Not today. Inside, the clerk behind the counter looked bored until she saw my stack of paperwork. "All this for one filing?" she asked. "Yes," I said, steady. "For one home, one legacy." Rosa leaned in, whispering loudly. "And one big can of whoop-ass." The clerk blinked. Mr. Coleman coughed into his hand to hide a laugh. When I signed the last line on the submission form, I felt the weight shift inside me, fear turning into fire. The clerk stamped it, "Received by Court of Wayne County." That single thud echoed louder than any insult Nina had ever thrown at me. Mr. Coleman nodded with satisfaction. "There it is. Paper beats poison every time." We walked out into the sunlight. Rosa stretched her arms wide, breathing deep. "Girl, that smell right there, that's justice marinating." I laughed. For once the sound wasn't bitter. It was clean. The courthouse smelled like floor polish and nerves. Even after years of cleaning alleys and sidewalks, that scent of sterile wax made me more uneasy than any dumpster ever had. I sat at the long oak bench, hands folded, wearing the only suit I owned, a dark gray one that had survived both weddings and funerals. Rosa whispered beside me, "You look like you're about to win a presidential debate, not a court case." I smiled faintly. "I'm not here to argue. I'm here to clean up." The bailiff's voice cut through the hum, "All rise for Judge Patricia Evans." She entered, tall, sharp eyes behind rimless glasses, a woman who'd seen enough liars to recognize one from across the room. She didn't smile. "You may be seated." Across the aisle, Nina sat next to a nervous-looking lawyer in a cheap blue suit. Eric sat on her other side, eyes down, shoulders slumped. She wore a white blouse and pearls, the innocent daughter-in-law costume, and adjusted her hair every 30 seconds. When the clerk read the charges, attempted property fraud, document forgery, and vandalism, Nina's lips tightened, but she managed a tear. It shimmered perfectly like a trained actress hitting her cue. Then she stood and began her performance. "Your Honor." She started, voice trembling just enough. "This is all a misunderstanding. My husband and I only wanted to help his mother organize her affairs. She's old, forgetful." I could almost hear Rosa's teeth grinding beside me. Judge Evans raised a brow. "Is that your official defense, Ms. Jennings?" "Yes, Your Honor," Nina said sweetly. She must have confused the paperwork. "I would never steal from her. She's family." The word family dropped like a sour note in the room. When it was my turn, I stood. My knees creaked, but my voice didn't. "Your Honor," I said calmly, "I might be old, but I'm not forgetful. I've been picking up trash in this city for 40 years, and I know garbage when I see it." A ripple of laughter rolled through the courtroom. Even Judge Evans smirked, before quickly hiding it behind her hand. Nina glared at me, all sweetness gone. "She's lying." Mr. Coleman rose slowly like an old lion preparing to roar. "Your Honor, may I present evidence?" The judge nodded. He walked to the projector screen, clicked a button, and Officer Daniel's photos appeared, images of the slashed tires, the overturned bins, the stolen boxes from my porch, all time-stamped and clear as daylight. Then came the next slide, the forged deed enlarged, with the smudged notary seal circled in red. "Note," he said, tapping it with his pen, "this seal belongs to a notary who retired in 2019. Yet this document was supposedly signed in 2024. Even a raccoon could smell that lie." Laughter again. Judge Evans didn't stop it this time. Mr. Coleman continued, his voice rising just enough to fill the chamber. My client, Mrs. Martha Jennings, devoted her life to cleaning this city, and even now she's here cleaning up a different kind of mess, one left by greed. Nina's lawyer fumbled through papers, muttering, "Objection irrelevant, emotion overruled," Judge Evans said instantly. Nina turned red, then pale. "This is unfair," she burst out. "She's manipulating everyone. Look at her. She's pretending to be some saint." Judge Evans' gaze turned razor sharp. "Ms. Jennings, you will speak only when spoken to." "Do you understand?" Nina froze, swallowing hard. "Yes, Your Honor." The tension thickened. Even Rosa stopped chewing her gum. Then the judge turned to me. "Mrs. Jennings, do you have anything to add before I make my ruling?" I met her eyes. My voice came steady, quiet, but firm. "Just this, Your Honor. I never asked for riches. I only wanted respect. And if defending my home means standing alone, then I'll stand till the end." Silence. The kind that vibrates. Even Nina's lawyer looked down. Judge Evans leaned back, pen tapping softly against the bench. Then she spoke. "This court finds that the deed listing Eric Jennings as owner and submitted on his behalf by Nina Jennings is fraudulent. The property at 114 Cedar Lane remains solely under the ownership of Mrs. Martha Jennings." A soft gasp went through the courtroom. Rosa squeezed my hand under the table. But the judge wasn't done. "As for the forged documents and acts of vandalism, the matter will be referred to the district attorney for prosecution. Ms. Jennings, you may prepare yourself for further legal consequences." Nina shot up. "That's ridiculous. You can't." The gavel struck. A sharp crack that silenced everything. Judge Evans glared. "I can, and I just did." The courtroom erupted, half laughter, half applause. Even the bailiff grinned. Rosa whispered, "That woman deserves her own Netflix show." Nina sank into her chair, face pale, eyes glassy. For once she had no line left to deliver. Mr. Coleman turned to me, a twinkle in his eye. "Well, Martha looks like the trash finally took itself out." I tried not to laugh, but it burst out anyway, a loud, genuine, belly-deep laugh that echoed through the room, the kind that feels like years of dust finally swept clean. Judge Evans smiled faintly. "Mrs. Jennings, you're free to go. I trust your neighborhood will rest easier now." I nodded. "Cleaner too, Your Honor." She chuckled. "Somehow I don't doubt that." We left the courtroom to a chorus of quiet applause. Outside, the air felt fresher, the sky bluer. Rosa threw an arm around my shoulder. "Girl, you didn't just win a case, you won a damn revolution." I looked back at the courthouse doors. "No," I said softly. "I just took out the trash." It had been 5 days since the courtroom showdown. 5 days of silence. The kind of silence that doesn't rest. It just lingers, pacing through hallways and whispering through open doors. I thought I'd grown used to solitude after my husband passed, but this quiet felt different. It wasn't grief. It was the aftertaste of justice, heavy, honest, and somehow lonely. That morning I was sweeping the porch the way I always did when I needed to think. The maple leaves rustled across the driveway, dry and gold, catching in the cracks of old cement. Lady Dignity purred nearby, lazy under the sun. Then I heard footsteps on gravel, slow, hesitant. I looked up. Eric. He stood at the edge of the yard, hands shoved deep in his jacket pockets. He looked smaller, not in size, but in spirit. His shoulders, once proud, now slumped. His eyes carried the kind of exhaustion no job loss or hangover could explain. "Martha," he said quietly, "can we talk?" I leaned on my broom. "You can talk. Whether I answer depends on what you say." He nodded, stepping closer. "I just came to pick up some of our things and to, say something." I waited. He took a breath, rubbing his forehead. I should have stopped her. When Nina started pushing those ideas, the papers, the lies, I told myself it wasn't my fight. I didn't want conflict. But that was cowardice, not peace. I didn't interrupt. Let the truth breathe on its own. I thought he continued voice cracking. If I ignored it, it would all go away. That you'd forgive me like you always did. I didn't realize silence can wound deeper than words. The broom handle felt heavy in my hands. I looked at him, this man I once carried in my arms when he scraped his knee, the same boy who used to wait at the window for my garbage truck to honk when I came home from the night shift. He wasn't that boy anymore. But in that moment, a flicker of him still lived behind those tired eyes. "Eric," I said softly, "you don't earn forgiveness by asking. You earn it by changing." He nodded, eyes glistening. "I know. I just wanted you to hear me say it. I was wrong. About her. About me. About everything." We stood there, the air between us trembling with everything unspoken. Years of resentment, missed birthdays, phone calls that ended too soon. Finally, I set the broom aside and took a step forward. He looked startled when I reached out, resting a hand on his shoulder. "I raised you to take responsibility, not excuses," I said. "You forgot that for a while. But remembering is a start." He swallowed hard. "You really think I can change?" I gave a small smile. If trash can turn into compost, a man can turn into something useful again. He laughed softly through tears, the same laugh he had as a kid when I used to chase him around the yard with a water hose. It broke something in both of us, that laugh. I opened my arms just slightly. He hesitated, then stepped in. The hug was awkward, tight, and full of memories. His chin rested on my shoulder, and for a moment neither of us spoke. The past didn't disappear, it just stopped bleeding. When we pulled apart, his eyes were wet. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what I asked. For not hating me." I shook my head. "I don't waste energy on hate. I save it for sweeping." He smiled, a real one this time. Then he loaded a few boxes into his car. I didn't stop him. Some things you let go so that other things can heal. Before he left, he turned back. "You'll be okay, right?" "I was okay before you got here," I said gently. "I'll be okay again." He nodded, and for the first time in years, he didn't look away when saying goodbye. The car disappeared down the street, leaving behind a trail of autumn dust. I stood there for a long while, the broom resting against my leg, the air still humming with the echo of reconciliation. Then a horn honked twice. Rosa's old sedan rolled up window down her grin as wide as a sunrise. "Girl that looked emotional from the corner," she shouted. "Need caffeine to balance it out." She handed me a steaming cup of coffee. I took it laughing softly. "You always know when to show up." "That's my superpower," she said. "Emotional timing and gossip radar." We sat on the porch steps watching the wind scatter the leaves we'd just swept. "Men can learn," Rosa said, sipping her drink. "Takes lessons and consequences. Mostly consequences." I chuckled. "You sound like a philosopher in orange overalls." "I prefer sanitation, Sage," she corrected. The laughter between us wasn't loud, just warm, steady, the kind that fills cracks where pain used to live. After a while, Rosa nodded toward the sky. "You ever think about what's next?" After all this mess, I stared into the distance. I used to think cleaning was just about trash. Now I think it's about what you make space for after it's gone. She smiled. "Then you got plenty of space now, Martha." The wind picked up, sweeping the last of the golden leaves across the yard, nature doing its own kind of cleaning. I took a sip of coffee, its warmth grounding me. The house behind me no longer felt like a battlefield. It felt like mine again, not because of the walls, but because peace had moved back in. 6 months later, the chair still creaked the same way. Only this time, it wasn't under the weight of exhaustion, it was under the comfort of peace. The porch had a new coat of pale yellow paint, the same shade my husband once said looked like sunshine that decided to stay. The railing gleamed, the wood smelled faintly of cedar, and the wind chimes Rosa gave me tinkled in the soft spring breeze. For the first time in a long while, I sat there with no list of chores in my head, no bills to dread, no footsteps to fear, just the sound of the world moving forward and me still here, still standing. I leaned back in that same armchair, the one where it all began, and let the sunlight soak into my skin. Lady Dignity sprawled across my lap, purring like an engine in neutral. Somewhere in the kitchen, the slow rhythm of barbecue sauce bubbling in the pot filled the air with sweet smoke and peace. Then came Rosa's unmistakable laugh, loud enough to scare away the pigeons on the fence. "Martha Jennings, I swear you're the only woman who can make quiet retirement look like a federal operation." I smiled without opening my eyes. "That's because peace needs maintenance, Rosa, just like everything else worth keeping clean." She plopped down beside me, holding a tray of ribs so big it looked like it could feed the whole city sanitation department. "Maintenance, huh? Then call me your deputy of flavor control." Behind her, Mr. Coleman appeared slower but dignified as ever, wearing a hat too formal for a backyard barbecue. "Deputy of flavor control," he muttered. "More like commissioner of cholesterol." "Don't sass me," Lawyer Rosa shot back. "You eat more ribs than any man your age should legally be allowed." He winked. "I only break laws that come with sauce." I laughed deep and easy. It had been years since laughter came to me without effort. Years since sound itself felt like company. Through the open gate, two familiar voices called Grandma. The kids, Maya and Trevor, came running up the path, arms full of dandelions and sticky smiles. Their visits had become regular now, court-approved and joy-infused. They didn't talk about their parents much, and I didn't ask. Sometimes love meant letting silence heal what words couldn't. Eli handed me a flower crown, lopsided but magnificent. "We made this for you," I put it on. "Well, now I'm the queen of cleanliness," Rosa grinned. "Long may she sweep." The kids giggled, then dashed toward the backyard where Mr. Coleman was already pretending not to notice them stealing extra ribs from his plate. The laughter swelled, echoing against the porch columns. I realized something simple, something that should have hurt the house, felt full again, but not crowded. It wasn't the family I thought I'd have, but it was family all the same. As the day went on, the yard filled with smells, smoked hickory sweet cornbread, and the tang of Rosa's secret sauce, which she swore was just love and paprika, but I suspected bourbon. Music drifted from a radio old Motown, the kind my husband used to whistle along to. Mr. Coleman tried to dance, nearly tripping over Lady Dignity. Rosa hollered, "Sit down before you file your own lawsuit." He laughed so hard he almost spilled his lemonade. I sat back in my chair, the sun painting everything gold, and let it all wash over me. The laughter, the food, the warmth. For the first time in years, my heart didn't ache when I thought of the past. It nodded. It forgave. Eric had called last week. He was in therapy now, working at a recycling center in another city. "It feels right," he'd said, turning waste into something new. I told him that made two of us. The wind picked up, carrying laughter and the faint clang of the wind chimes. Rosa came over with a refill of iced tea. "You ever think you'd get here?" she asked softly. "Where's here, exactly?" I asked. "Here," she said, motioning around the house, the sunlight, the kids, the peace, after all that mess. I thought about it for a moment. I guess I didn't know what peace looked like until I had to fight for it. She nodded. "That's the kind that lasts." The afternoon drifted into amber light. The twins curled up on a blanket, snoring softly. Rosa hummed a gospel tune under her breath. Mr. Coleman dozed in his chair hat tilted over his face. And me, I just sat there listening to the soft creaks of my old armchair, the one that had held me through anger, humiliation, and finally freedom. I traced the smooth wooden armrest, repainted, repaired, but still the same wood, just like me. Lady Dignity stretched and settled again. Somewhere in the distance, a train whistle sounded long and low, fading like the final note of a story that had finally reached its rest. I took a deep breath. The scent of barbecue and blooming lilac filled my lungs. My life had been a long day's work, messy, noisy, but honest. And now it was finally time to sit. I looked toward the horizon and whispered to myself, I cleaned streets my whole life, but the hardest cleanup was my own house. And Lord, it was worth it. If this story touched your heart, take a moment before you go. Leave a comment below, tell me where you're listening from, and what part of Martha's journey spoke to you the most. because every story of standing up, forgiving, or starting over deserves to be heard. Hit subscribe if you believe dignity never retires, and share this video with someone who needs a little strength today. Thank you for spending time with us. Your voice matters, and it helps keep stories like this alive.